Hoyoverse keeps dropping lore bombshells out of nowhere during down patches and leaving it entirely up to us to uncover the truth. While this isn't necessarily a bad thing, it does stir quite a bit of activity from lore enthusiasts like myself and brings even more excitement for the future, if you count breaking our brains as part of it. If you haven't seen it, Hoyoverse released a web event that focuses on the lore of some of the most ancient beings in Teyvat, the three Moon Sisters. Up until now, we have had very little information about their mythos. Information is purposefully left vague, which complicates things a bit. However, with the most recent teaser, I want to revisit the legends surrounding the three sisters, provide my own speculation regarding their fate, and discuss what or who they could be now. Please note that this is a leak-free environment. The information presented has been provided by Genshin Impact or based on personal speculation. Sections of the video will be timestamped accordingly. Theories will be addressed with proper disclaimers, and links will be provided in the description for related topics and source material. Spoilers for Archon quests up until version 5.4 will be discussed, so please be mindful before continuing. Additionally, the titles Moon Sisters, Three Sisters, These Sisters, and Three Goddesses will be used interchangeably here from me to describe these key figures. Now, with all of that said, let's uncover some truths, shall we? Before we get into the fine details of the web event itself, it's important that we recap on what we know so far of the Moon Sisters. The three moon goddesses were named Arya, Sonnet, and Canon. Existing in a time far more ancient than Rex Lapis himself, these three held dominion over the night sky and would alternate phases individually to hold their sovereignty. They resided in the lunar palace, with each goddess sharing a deep passion and love for the stars of daybreak. Some legends even suggest that these three moons could bring dreams and songs to the sleepers of three worlds. Unfortunately, the three goddesses would come to meet their end following a great calamity that reached the stars. The sisters, who also bore witness to a forbidden union between a traveler and an angel, had their palace quote-unquote ransacked of stars. Some legends state that the sisters turned against one another. Others depict two of the goddesses perishing, with one of their corpses remaining in the sky. Even more tell of a third sister, so overcome with grief about her sister's demise that she never left the lunar palace again. So, from the original tales of the Moon Sisters, we've learned that each sister controlled the night sky. They witnessed a forbidden union, a great calamity reached them, and presumably two of the sisters perished, the corpse of one remains in the sky, and the third was left to grieve. With the legend of the Moon Sisters briefed, let's return to the main focus. The web event states, the prophecy has been unveiled and the new moon approaches. The trinity of moon goddesses, who once steered the primordial celestial sphere and wove love and passion into the very heart of the world, have long since faded into the shadows of time. Yet, those who follow the tides still sing and pray, for a new moon is set to rise. When the eternal moon fell, the heavens and earth were thrown into chaos. When the iridescent moon shattered, the crimson shadow sank into the abyssal sea. When the frost moon ceased to turn, nations faltered and fell into ruin. The world, no longer sheltered by eternity, marches towards its final breath. Yet, from the ashes, the new moon rises, its ascent spinning the wheel of fate anew. Beneath the shadow of the moonlight, something stirs, unseen, yet inevitable. People of the moonlit world, please await the turning of the moon, for it will bring new revelations. This prophecy expands further on the limited knowledge we have of the three sisters, but also Teyvat's fate. While I will not go over every line in the prophecy individually, there are key points I want to focus on. 4 moons have been revealed: eternal, iridescent, frost, and new. Teyvat is quote-unquote no longer sheltered by eternity, and the new moon is set to rise. So what do each of these points mean? Well, again, in an attempt to explain these points, we need to revisit parts of Teyvat's ancient history as a basis. Keep in mind that Teyvat's history is incredibly expansive and has been purposely left vague, so I will do my best to keep things as simple and short as possible. In an era long past, there existed the Old World. The 7 sovereigns, the most powerful beings of the Light Realm, were led by Dragon King Nibelung. These dragons ruled the lands for an unknown time until the primordial one descended. Creating 4 shades of itself, it would defeat the sovereigns and claim teyvat. 4 centuries after the primordial one's triumph, it, alongside one of its shades, prepared an age for humanity. They created animals, plants, and eventually humans. Early humans would experience unrelenting ice, lightning, water, and flame. In this new world, celestial envoys would provide ancient humanity assistance, but only within the bounds of the heavenly principles. Teyvat would then enter a cyclical era of prosperity, destruction, and rebirth. During this first era of Teyvat, angels existed and acted as envoys of Celestia. They were tasked with guiding humanity and would provide unto them knowledge and wisdom. The Moon Sisters also exist alongside the angels at this time, and, as the legends tell, witness the union between an angel and a traveler. From this point forward, there will be heavy speculation. The web event showcased the consequences that followed with each of the moons passing. But what, if any, information do we have about the calamity or calamities that occurred as a result? Which characters, if any, could we possibly relate to the existing moons? Piece by piece, let's try to break this down. When the eternal moon fell, the heavens and earth were thrown into chaos. The fall of the eternal moon resulted in a catastrophic flood that affected multiple regions. If you remember, we discovered in the chasm that the fossils were perfectly preserved due to a sudden change in the ecosystem. As you explore, the fossilized animals appeared to be aquatic. In Inazuma, an ancient ruler attempted to build a kingdom dedicated to Irminsul. Once the quote-unquote mirror shattered, a flood emerged and destroyed the kingdom. In Fontaine, inhabitants of ancient Remuria quote-unquote grew tired of inscrutable eternity. Heavy downpour and eventually a flood would cover the region, resulting in the survivors having to rebuild from nothing. Yet, what pokes my brain the most is the entire concept around an eternal moon. If something is eternal, it is everlasting and unchanging, perpetual. If this sounds familiar, it's because it is. From the Travail trailer, Dainsleif states,
"In the perpetual meantime of a sheltered eternity, most are content to live and not to dream."
Which implies that it is easier for many to live in blissful ignorance rather than open their eyes to the truth. Quote, "The world, no longer sheltered by eternity, marches towards its final breath," end quote. Which is interesting to say, considering
only through eternity are you closest to the heavenly principles.
For centuries, as a result of her grief and fear of the heavenly principles, A vowed to maintain an eternity for Inazuma. Yet this unfettered and unperturbed eternity was merely a cage, afflicting not only those who revered her, but also her own person. Eventually, through the help of those closest to her, would she develop a new perspective on what her eternity truly meant and could be. Though only a theory, I'm deeply of the belief that both Raiden Makoto and Raiden A have a deep connection to the eternal moon. Perhaps the twin gods were split from the original eternal moon or somehow created by her before her untimely demise, something along those lines. Need I remind you that we have no information as to Raiden A's origins? While highly speculative on my end, it could very well be possible that, similarly to A, the Primordial One's intentions to protect humanity does more harm than good. Perhaps it only wants humanity to follow a specific formula, a cyclical formula that they should never break from, that its laws, so deeply embedded into what it has claimed for itself, are absolute. When the iridescent moon shattered, the crimson shadow sank into the abyssal sea. The word iridescent can mean any variation of shimmering, lustrous, colorful, etc. However, I feel the most appropriate would be, in this case, rainbow-colored. So, once it was shattered, part of its crimson essence fell into the abyssal sea. Now, where have we heard about a crimson moon in recent history? Arlecchino is a descendant of the Crimson Moon dynasty that harnesses the Bale Moon blood fire, a supposed cursed fire that runs through her veins and darkens her limbs. This flame is so powerful that anyone who is destroyed by it becomes after images. Note that her blood also has the ability to erase the memories of others. Through the use of her blood and through her unique abilities, this enables Arlecchino to allow an individual to go through rebirth. Perrin Harry tells the story of a child who was summoned through a Conrian ritual of acquiring descenders. As he crawled through a dark corridor, he was met with the question, "Are you dead?" repeatedly, until he confirmed, "Yes, I am dead." From this, he saw the illusion of the crimson moon being a titanic, horrified eye. When Arlecchino was a child, she had a peculiar dream, or nightmare, in which she dreamt of the crimson moon and noted how it watched her. She regarded it as the object of both death and grief. What both Arlecchino and Perrin Harry experienced is by no means a coincidence. Her signature weapon, Crimson Moon's Semblance, is a treasure trove of lore that comes directly from the Crimson Dynasty. It tells the story of priests convincing the then king that the Crimson Moon is the truth. Sentences that I find particularly interesting from it are, "O High Lord of the nobles of Conria, the crimson red moon has long since fallen into the abyssal firmament, and the blindness of your blood has ended your line." Thus, they yearned for transcendent individuals to build countless glorious towers and prayed for the long-dead crimson moon to bring them salvation. Oh, and I can't forget the lines, "Until the astrologists, branded as heretics, glimpsed into the inverted image of the false sky, the origin of all the world's fate," as well as, "Until the unquenchable flames of doubt and fury blazed across the dreamless realm like wildfire, finally burning to the moonlight-hued palace itself." It makes me wonder if the crimson moon is a way for one particular shade to view the world. When the frost moon ceased to turn, nations faltered and fell into ruin. During the On the Trail of Behemoths event, a mysterious NPC named Helka commissions both the Traveler and Paimon to help her gather combat data. She later reveals that devices similar to the secret source automatons in Natlan are found all throughout Nod Cry. She then goes on to say that a group of people named the Frost Moon Scions worship quote-unquote some kind of moon deity and practice ancient magic. Not only is the group name on the nose, but it's especially interesting how Hilka was advised not to investigate the group further. The Frostmoon Scions harness special powers. This is something that Malvika herself corroborates to the Traveler. Most importantly, their powers reportedly predate even the 7 elements themselves, which could possibly link them back to the eras of multiple ancient civilizations. By ancient, I mean Tiara of Frost artifact description levels of ancient. Do you remember what it reads? It states, "All prosperity must someday end, but this does not mean nothing is eternal. At the end of a cycle, the earth shall be renewed. Thus, eternity is cyclical." They say that, once upon a time, the people of the land could hear revelations from Celestia directly. The envoys of the gods walked among benighted humanity then. In those days, life was weak, and the earth was blanketed in unyielding ice. And speaking of cycles, this is incredibly similar to the research conducted by the Nartissenkreuz Ordo via the root cycle. These quest items have 3 separate parts, the first of which states, "The innermost circle is the circle of the Hyperborea, symbolizing the age of when the world was frozen and lost paradise." I strongly suspect that the Frostmoon Scions are descendants of the ancient civilizations that existed during this time period. Upon viewing the Frostmoon's animations, we see that once the Crimson Moon disappears, the Frostmoon itself halts any movement. Something to add that may be overreaching on my part, but I do think is important, is how each of these moons' fallings are described. The Eternal Moon fell, perhaps through battle or illness. The Iridescent Moon shattered, as if struck and divided into pieces or fragments, and the Frost Moon ceased to turn completely, as if frozen or stuck in time. Summer events in Genshin Impact often foreshadow themes that we revisit in future Archon quests. 2 of the easiest examples are Secret Summer Paradise, which hinted at the truth of Oceanids pertaining to Fontaine's prophecy, and most recently, Summertide Scales and Tales. Summertide Scales and Tales, or Simulanka, not only provided us with story beats that we revisited in Atlan's Archon quests, such as the False Sky, Stars, and Abyssal Dragon Thread, and so forth, but also the Moon Sisters and potential Nod Cry lore. Towards the Lighthouse, or Far Away, was a world quest in Simulanka in which the Traveler helps the inhabitants fixing a broken tower. Said tower functioned as a way for travelers from afar to return home safely. In order to repair the tower, the traveler needed to make 3 wishes to 3 separate goddesses who, after receiving said wish, created a light in the sky that would take the shape of the moon. So, how does this all come together? What does it mean? At the end of Act 5 of the Natlan Archon quests, Malvika reveals to the traveler that the shattered fragments seen from beyond the false sky are ancient moon remnants. What's even more interesting is that these remains are secret source technology, relics dating as far back as the old world. This would then imply that these moons, before they were destroyed, existed before the era of the primordial one. But Kiryu, that doesn't make sense, you say incredulously. How could they be connected to both the dragons and the primordial one at the same time? Well, it's because I'm of the belief that the Moon Sisters may actually be the primordial one's 4 shining shades. Additionally, I believe that these 3 goddesses uphold fate as decreed by the primordial one. Ancient dragonkind created various automatons and also artificial moons before the primordial one's descent. So, could it be possible that, with the primordial one overtaking Teyvat, had its shades fill the roles of these moons? And before you say it, yes, I know. There are 3 moons and 4 shades. I unfortunately do not have a definitive reasoning for it not being a one-to-one, but maybe it has something to do with the solar chariot or stars of daybreak. Renova, the shade of death, takes the appearance of 7 eyes in a unique sky, one that is presumably beyond Teyvat. She has a signature shade, pun intended, of crimson and black. Every time the crimson moon has made its appearance, it is full and during a time of conflict or disaster. From the cataclysm to the plane of Euthymia to Remoria, Renova always appears to be watching. The unknown god, who refers to themselves as a sustainer of heavenly principles, emerges through 3 distinct star-shaped portals when confronting the traveler and their sibling. The rifts in the sky share the same color as Renova's dimension and eyes, as well as the unknown god's attacks during the introduction. Considering we are familiar with 3 of the shades currently, death, life, and time, the unknown god could be void, as it fits the final artifact set piece. Throughout history, it appears as though Istaroth attempts to assist within the limitations of the heavenly principles. One such example is her providing the sage Aberaku with the wisdom to create the Dainichi Mikoshi, or her helping Raiden Makoto plant the sacred Sakura tree. Yet, we learned how Renova directly assisting with the Night Kingdom greatly displeased her master. Let's not forget that the Lord of the Night herself stated that the shades dislike being referred to either by name or mentioned at all. So, while the Undying Wind has all been but forgotten by history, perhaps it is something that she prefers. The moons themselves have such sparse information that it's a miracle there remain any legends of them. Though I suppose the many seeds of stories cultivated by time may contribute to this. Ultimately, the 3 Moon Sisters are among the most important trio because of how deeply interconnected they are with so many various elements of Teyvat's history. Hoyoverse really loves the rule of 3 but not really theme. By this, I mean how we have or had 3 moons, and now we are expecting a new moon to arise in due time. There's still the matter of uncovering who this new moon is and if they are someone close to us or someone new altogether. We have our trusty guide Paimon, who up until this point we have had no information on origin-wise. She has arguably the most celestial imagery of any character in the game and has been described by various NPCs as being otherworldly and silver, like a miniature moon. Of course, there is also the Welkin moon, who appears as a veiled maiden holding a staff. She shares a similar hairstyle and hair color to Paimon, but I hesitate to say that it's Paimon as a direct one-to-one. Given Genshin Impact's recurring theme of duality, it very well could be the case of the Welkin moon splitting and having various forms. I mean, she provides the player with primordial gems that are from beyond Teyvat, that contain the hopes and dreams of condensed universes. Regardless, I firmly believe that the Welkin moon is an actual moon. She, like the web event showcased, is represented in the center of 3 moons. For years, I've been speculating who she could be, and I can't help but be excited at the idea of her becoming relevant and or a future character, maybe even the new moon. Again, this is all speculative in nature, so I hesitate to say definitively who could be what in this scenario. We are officially in endgame content now. As excited as I am also a bit nervous. There are so many lingering questions that I think will get answered, but like most hoyoverse related writing, it will have to sit for some time before having that final payoff. I've desperately wanted Moon Sisters lore for years now, and we are finally getting it. Next, I'm hoping to see more about the Hexencircle and the role that they'll play in Teyvat's future. But on the topic of Teyvat's future, there's a lot happening on the way to Snezhnaya. Remember, the Fatui have 6 of the Gnosis, with a possible rebellion by the Tsaritsa on the horizon. Teyvat's cosmic borders are falling apart. The Abyss is an ever-constant threat and can never truly be stopped. Descenders are appearing far more frequently. The divine throne of Hydro has been destroyed. A sovereign has regained his full dragonhood, and the false sky has been breached. By all means, one would assume the heavenly principles would have awoken, but presumably they're still recovering from the Great War of Vengeance. So how do you think they'll react when they wake up?